Before we get started, I want to remind you to tweet and to share your insights on social media using the hashtag GLF Bonn 2020. We want to know how you're connecting, sharing, learning, and acting throughout the conference. Now, if you're watching in Hoover, we also want to know where in the world are you watching from today? Please introduce yourself. You can do so in the chat box, and we'd love to hear where you're calling in from. The focus of this session is to begin a conversation that is rooted in reality. Too often, we get caught up in our own ideas of what could work, our global perspective on what is needed, but we're out of touch with the realities of smallholder producers, farmers, fishers, and what changes need to be made to have action on the ground. So we will be using Slido today to get to know you, the audience, and to hear your experiences and the questions that you have on the topic. At this moment, I'd love to ask everyone to head to slido.com and to enter the code GLF Bonn 2020. Once you're into Slido, go ahead and select the Grassroots Relief and Development Agency room titled Greta. And there you'll be able to see our first question. And although we'll be talking about reality and challenges, we're also going to be talking about innovation and solutions. So what we want to know is, what words come to mind when you hear innovation? This could be one word, 2 words. All right, we've got out of the box. Just a reminder to everyone, slido.com, SLIDO, and the code is GLF Bonn 2020. And we want to know what words come to mind when you hear innovation. There is no right answer, especially when it comes to innovation. And our thinking will definitely evolve as we go throughout the session. So I also have the pleasure at this moment to introduce the man who started it all and the organization who's really the main pillar of this session. That's the Grassroots Relief and Development Agency. We're so happy and pleased to have Moses on this call with us. So Moses, I'd love if you could introduce yourself, the important work you're doing, and why you wanted to host this session today. Moses, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Hello.
Yep,
yes,
we can hear you, Moses.
Moses. Yes. Moses Chola from Grassroots Relief and Development Agency, South Sudan. Yeah, we are doing agriculture in the total state and helping women and people with disabilities to do agriculture in terms of climate digitalization of agricultural value chains and to tackle the food security, adaptation, and resilience to climate change. For women empowerment, how can sustainable agriculture and biodiversity and ecosystem losses be recovered by the community and women in that location. We're also introducing mobile technology in terms of fighting COVID-19 because we realize it's the use of money. Cash is now something tricky for the families and the old age. So we introduced mobile banking technology. This year they have now we call it mGrosh. mGrosh is a mobile technology where we can bank money through using the mobile app. So that's what we are doing in South Sudan, Mundri West, Mundri East. We also teaching them about protection of ecosystem because we realize people resorted of cutting down trees for survival, and it's now affecting the ecosystem. And now the challenge is more in that place. So they are now resorting of maybe doing agricultural production in terms of agriculture. That they are planting sorghum, they are planting other things that can sustain the family and the returnees who went coming back to South Sudan for their livelihoods. It's very important to tackle issues of women empowerment, because here in South Sudan, the issue is this issue of farmers. We also offer them techniques and help agricultural system to adapt and mitigate the effects, because we realize that without food security in South Sudan, more people will be going hunger, and hunger will kill many people because there's no other things that they can do, because more returnees are coming back, so they need something to do, at least to make them to give them a livelihood, to support their families and to support the community. So it's very important to introduce agriculture, total agriculture, and also in terms of technology, to help in technology provision of seeds and tools, because they lost all tools when they were war here, and they went back to the camp, IDPs places. So they are coming back. They need to be empowered. Those women need to be empowered through the provision seeds, provision of tools, and also giving them trainings on women empowerment, issues of empowering women with young women with disabilities. That's very important to do and to tackle in South Sudan here, because they face a lot of challenges in terms of gaining support in livelihood, and also making their family survive. So we think that that will be the best solution to support them and to give them support so that they can move and build their communities. Yes.
Thank you so much, Moses. It's so great to have your knowledge here in this session, and thank you so much for coordinating so that later on we can actually hear directly from farmers in this area. So yes. I want to take the time to ask the audience another question and to see where we're at in terms of what words come to mind when you hear innovation.
Yes.
So we see people have responded. We've got creative as a massive one, problem solving, yes. Rethinking, new practices that are more efficient and more effective than the current ones we use. That speaks to what you were just touching on. And I think this is a great opportunity to ask everyone to keep this in mind. We are asking to think differently, to think about new design, new processes, progress. And at the same time, while we're thinking about these new ways, we need to really be rooted in what are the specific challenges that people are facing. You know, there's yeah. no good use in having this creative technology and idea that is not applicable to local realities on the ground. So I want to ask the audience another question. The second Slido question we have for you are, what are some of the major challenges farmers are facing today? So we have yes. plenty of speakers who will touch on this coming up, but we just want to know from the audience, what are your initial thinking? There's really no right answer. What do you think are the major challenges that farmers are facing? And so as we wait for you to do that, just keep in mind, we're going to have some great speakers who are very well in touch with this reality. And the first one, I'm really excited to welcome a very special speaker. This is Paula Caballero. She's the Managing Director of Climate and Water at RARE. And she's worked in several positions from the World Resources Institute, the World Bank, the Colombian government. And we're so excited to have her to give an opening address and set the scene for us today. Paula, I hand the stage over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Indeed, I am the Managing Director of RARE's Lands for Life program, and we seek to empower farmers in rural communities to become informed decision makers. And that's important because climate change is changing the world around us, particularly for farmers. You know, farming used to be calendar-based. It was possible to predict routine cycles from year to year. No longer. Monsoon seasons are changing, and trends like soil erosion are undermining the land's productivity. Climate change is actually exacerbating the risks and uncertainty that are already prevalent in agriculture. Its symptoms like increased water scarcity or flooding, more pests and diseases, we're going to hear about locusts, for example, all threaten smallholder farmers and rural communities around the world. And yet there are many well-established practices that can help to mitigate these impacts. But farmers, extension agents continue to use and promote many unsustainable practices. And these are practices that prioritize short-term agricultural yields and don't build up the resilience needed for that long-term ecosystem health that actually underpins these livelihoods. So I'll have two important messages. And the first one is that unless we align agricultural productivity with the functionality and productivity of ecosystems around the world, it will be impossible to feed the world in the coming decades. And I would say that this alignment is also very relevant to small-scale farmers and coastal communities around the world. And some of these are some of the most vulnerable peoples. Their precarious situation often pushes them in a business-as-usual world into what we know as the tragedy of the commons. Catch the last fish before somebody else does. And in both cases, an integrated understanding of how their productivity is directly tied to the health of the ecosystems around them and of the needed shifts and practices is really key. What I want to underline is that this is not a technical question. There's no formula for managing risk. Development is now in many cases about informed and intelligent risk management. And certainly COVID points to that too. So I would say that the most fundamental innovation needed is to empower fishers and farmers to become informed and agile decision makers, true agents of change. And it's for us about providing the training, the shift in mindsets, so farmers and fishers can themselves make information relevant and actionable to help them translate their existing knowledge for new realities. Now, more than ever, as governments and multilaterals think about COVID-19 recovery packages, fishers and farmers need to be at the heart of this conversation. And this can only happen if they have a level of autonomy to co-design their own sustainable, productive systems. Let me show you what I mean. I want to introduce you to Ramon. He's a farmer from northwestern Colombia. And with his wife, Carmen, they've been working on a farm for 17 years. And recently, they shared this video I'd like to invite you to see.
Buenas tardes, ingeniera. Pues aquí haciendo la tareita que usted le dejó a mi esposa, ¿no? Que tenía que hacer un análisis de suelo. Y entonces, pues a mí me dijo que le hiciera ese favor, ¿no? Que participara, porque como yo soy también del miembro de la casa, pues tengo que colaborarle a la esposa, ¿no? Entonces, resulta que esto a mí me ha gustado mucho porque es importantísimo para el agricultor, ¿no? Porque yo estoy trabajando hace años, desde muy niño, ha trabajado la tierra y yo nunca sé qué es un análisis de tierra, ¿no? ¿Qué es el potasio? ¿Qué es el fósforo? ¿Qué es el zinc? O sea, todas las cosas que se identifican la tierra, uno no sabe. Porque al ver uno abrir un hueco, uno topa la tierra toda del mismo color, pero entonces no tiene las partículas que tiene la tierra. Entonces, a mí me ha gustado mucho y ha tenido mucha, o sea, esto me sirve para mucha experiencia, ¿no? Sobre este análisis de tierra. Y encontré muchas lombrices, que estas lombrices son los microorganismos que la abonan la tierra, ¿no? Es muy buenísimo porque mi tierra tiene mucha lombriz. Bueno.
So as you can see, Ramon is very proud of what he and his wife are learning. In the video, you can't really see it, but she's holding a health card like the one that you're seeing right now. This is an example of the tools that RARE has to empower farmers and fishers to change how they interact and understand what their soil, what their land, what their seas are like. After decades of working in the fields, Ramon and Carmen have changed the way they look at soil. They see it as a living medium, which has now led to a shift in how they farm their land. The practices they now implement will be sustainable forever. It's not because of an incentive or a regulation, but out of conviction. So my second key message is that at its core, unsustainable farming and fishing practices are people problems. So we need people-centered solutions. And this means supplying more than just information. A truly people-centered approach takes into account a farmer or fisher's motivations and aspirations. It empowers them to be a part of the solution, a decision maker with agency, which is key to lasting change. Technological innovations then help us bring these behaviors about and bring them to scale. You'll hear from my colleague, Raymond Jacob from our Indonesia team, who's helping fishers and fish buyers use a mobile app called Our Fish to capture data that is critical for decision-making in fisheries. And in Colombia, I'm excited about our partnership with Precision Agriculture for Development to equip farmers around large landscapes with mobile-based tools to help tailored information and assistance. Smallholders are key to delivering nature-based solutions through productive sectors like agriculture and fisheries. And their numbers globally make their impact anything but small. By making them a part of the solution, we will have real and lasting impact for people and nature. Thank you so much, and I look forward to a rich conversation.
It seems we may have had an audio problem. Thank you, Paula, so much for providing those valuable insights. I'm a true believer that we can only accelerate progress by having a critical examination and conversation on what we're doing today. And the focus on looking at the trade-off between agricultural productivity, ecosystem health is absolutely crucial. So now we have the pleasure of taking you to the very landscapes that Moses is working in. We have an interview and conversation with two farmers in South Sudan. This will be done through video, and the translations and subtitles will be shown at the bottom.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm okay. Can you tell me about yourself?
My name is called Hadia Helen. I'm a farmer. I'm staying in Montreal West, particularly in a place called Haimelekia. And then I'm a student schooling at AMREF, Marine Health Science Institute.
Can you tell me about your story about farming? What are the worst experiences?
The droughts are there mostly in the month of March until October. There it's continuous raining, but there are some dry spells that comes in. It is not in a fixed month. It keeps alternating each and every year. Those droughts come in, and it makes the crops not to yield well. Besides drought, there are also some pests that destroy the crops.
So what's your expectation for the project?
I would expect that farmers around, including me, should be trained on how to cultivate a variety of crops. Like that such incidents, if they happen, they can be able to harvest a quality that can sustain them for the next season. And also, modernized ways of cultivation. The farmers will be encouraged to cultivate in large-scale farming so that they can produce for both the home consumption and the surplus can be sold in market to help them in other things.
So what do you want, at least you wish to have to make the project successful?
What I would want that the farmers to be given the garden tools, for example, the slicers, the panga, and the hose, but then they can be able to clear the land ready for the rain that will come in, so that they can be able to cultivate on time. And they should also be taught on how to manage those uncertainty that will come in, because the rains are not regular.
So what's your hopes and dreams and even goals that you want at least to deliver when you're doing this project?
My goals and dreams is that youth and the farmers around who are redundant, they have nothing to do. They should be equipped, they should be taught on how to have a better way of farming, and that they should be able to produce food that is enough for the nation of South Sudan, and even they can be able to export to the neighboring countries, so that we cannot have issues of food insecurity around us, and even we can be able to kick malnutrition out of this place.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Hello.
Hello. Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Nana Zabi Efren. I'm in Montreal. I'm a farmer. I'm a member in a vessel.
Can you tell me about your personal experience of our project?
Yes, my personal experience, like last year, I was able to cultivate 2 acres. The 2 acres, I'm doing mixed crops like a simsim and sorghum and beans. Then cassava plus green light. Last year, there is a green grasshopper which have come because of too much rain. they come and destroy the grains of sorghum. This red insect come and sit on the grain of the sorghum. It makes sorghum very difficult to yield very well. Some of my neighbors, they are having goats. The issue of this Mondari, they are coming with the cattle. Some of my cassava have been destroyed by these cattle and also the goats. These people, they need awareness. They have to take care of their cattle. These are some challenges that I faced last year.
What's your expectation of this project?
My expectation is this year I wanted to at least cultivate 6 acres crops that will be able to sustain my family. And also my expectation is from these 6, I've planned to 2 I will be sold them out because I wanted to get some agricultural tools started with my farming because I wanted to get a person that is having experience more than me to come and train me. And what I'm expecting, my neighbors that have cattle and goats, they have to take care of their goats because farming is the only way for us to chase away famine.
And what have you learned personally from this project?
What I've learned is by doing much effort on farming, all the poverty that I have, it will be washed out. And if all of us based our capacity on agriculture, I think nothing will defeat us, and we cannot always be asking donors to support us or the people that are now entrepreneurs. We cannot come and knock their door.
What are you struggling with, or what else do you wish to have?
What I'm struggling to get is the seeds.
What's your hope on this project?
My dream is I want to be an example to the youth and to the community where I visit because I wanted to bring all of us in front and fight against famine. If we could able to get expertise to come and train our farmers in Great Mundri, it will be great. We will be able to get experience, like to be modernized.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you too.
Wow, that was incredible and so amazing to get a candid reality check by just getting into conversation to hear what farmers are struggling with, what their expectations are, the lessons they've learned, and also what their dreams are for themselves and their communities. So I'd like to take the chance to go back to the Slido results and the question that we asked you in the beginning, which is, what are some of the major challenges that you think farmers are facing? All right, definitely lack of support from government is one. Inadequate tools and information is key. That farms are producing waste. There's unfavorable land policies, the lack of policymakers and their support, lack of education, so a need for training. Droughts is something we definitely just heard about. Insecurity of tenure. These are all things that I think we're going to touch on. Financial support. And I think it's important to recognize that, these assumptions that we make around what are some of the challenges that farmers are facing are absolutely pivotal, because that's the foundation with which we begin to start a conversation, right? And we start to build our solutions, our ideas. We begin to implement. We begin to fundraise, engage in conversation on behalf of farmers. And so it's absolutely pivotal that when we ask ourselves this question, we understand that there is this impact that's going to happen. There are all of these assumptions that we're making. And so what we want to do today is to be able to continue this conversation. And we have a great group of panelists who are going to be talking about the realities that they're facing. They're doing incredible work, whether it's with farmers, fishers, and youth. And they're going to take us through what challenges their communities are facing and what innovations they're currently implementing at the moment. So I have the pleasure of introducing to you Crystal Coe. She is inspiring young people and women through her work as administrator of Better World Cameroon and her role as a youth development and environmental advocate. Crystal, I hand over the stage to you to tell us a little bit more about your work and what you're doing.
Hello, everybody. My name is Crystal Coe. I come from Cameroon, but currently I find myself in Portugal, where I am undergoing training in peace work and humanitarian relief, because as some of you may know, there has been an ongoing crisis in Cameroon now for the last 3 to 4 years. And as a response to that, we had to come here to get some training so that we can, in effect, develop the project that would help the communities that we were working back in Cameroon with. So as I was introduced, I am an administrator, but I also see myself as a youth advocate working with young people and women in communities in Cameroon, particularly in the northwest region of Cameroon, where we have a demonstration center that we use to train young people and women on sustainable methods that we think would help really with the situation of food, but also to transition local communities into sustainable, resilient communities. So from the slide, one of the major challenges that we have, I wouldn't call it drought, but we have a water issue. From the first picture, we can see that people have to go long distances far into the bushes to be able to find some water. And even at that, from the second picture, the water isn't clean. And in the community where I come from, there is a habit where people leave their homes and go to their farms, which are like a day or a half day's journey. So they have to sleep there. And in that case, there's no water to drink, there's no water to bathe or to cook something. So it's really a difficult situation. And over the years, also, the situation with the climate has changed. We have longer rainy seasons, we have longer dry seasons, we have and in situations like that, it's difficult with the timing to know when to plant and all of that. So really, water has become a major issue. Next slide, please. So one of the things we are proposing at our demonstration center is to do water catchments. So water catchments are really just adapted ways. So we bring in the technology that has come to be able to catch the water and to be able to preserve it. So in the first picture, you can see that we use the community a lot because our project is a community project. I said a demonstration center to teach the people in the community, especially the women and the young people. So you can see, maybe it's not very clear, but the women are digging the trench for the water. So we find a water source and we dig a trench, we channel it and catch it in the second picture. That's like the catching points of the water. And we store it so that in the times when there is not so much water, we are still able to use this water. And then we have the fresh water in the last picture, which is very good for drinking because we install filters that sieve the water, drain the water. And all this, for me, is a sustainable solution because it uses basically local cheap materials, stones, sand, so really just things that we would find around. And with the effort of the community, they could just raise some money to get the other things like the cement and the pipes for the water. But really, this is one of the ways in which we are resolving the water crisis issue. And the next problem that we also have in our project, in our communities, is the land. Over the years, the land has been misused, the land has been mistreated, but also because of lack of information. Our mothers used to burn the soil and destroy the soil, and then there was also shifting cultivation. And all of these practices are things that we are trying to discourage. So what we are bringing in as a solution is permaculture. Permaculture is a sustainable way of doing farming where you incorporate concepts like composting. In the second picture, we see where a group of young people in one of our training programs are preparing a compost. So we are able to revitalize the soil, and then in the next picture, we use it on top of the already I wouldn't call so fertile soil or destroyed soil as a way to revive it. Then we have, we can see them planting and we are getting amazing results. These are just one of the ways that we are able to tackle these issues, but we are also planting soil fertility plants like the acacias where we use their leaves to nourish the soil. So that's what I can say about that situation.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I already see so many great comments and responses. People want to know a little bit more about how you're doing this. What are some of the challenges you faced? And we're going to get to that in our panel discussion following this. But at the moment, now I want to introduce our second speaker, who is Samuel Ajimang Tutu. He is a sustainability officer, a youth and landscapes alumni, a good friend, and someone who's been working in agroforestry practices related to cocoa and other high-value crops in Ghana. Samuel, I hand the floor over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. As rightly introduced, I work in the cocoa landscape, and we also have our unique challenges that we are going through and dealing with them. More often, you get to see farmers, going into farming without, being able to do a better assessment of how much of risk they are, how much input is supposed to put in order to maximize profit. Virtually, they go into farming without any plan in place. So you get to see that they experience low yield. You get to see a lot of bad management practices some farmers adopt. Farmers are the best scientists, I always say, because they always keep on trying and they fail. They keep on trying different methodologies and then possibly arrive at the best solution to really revive, which they always don't get to. And so it makes really farmers face difficult end times. At the end of the crop season, there's high rate of illiteracy among farmers. The list goes on and on and on. We also have a climate change impacting on the cocoa. You could see on your screen land use between 1990 and somewhere 2015. There you could see a clear manifestation of deforestation taking place within the landscape that I am working in. And so we are losing the forest. That places a lot of emphasis on the growth and the productivity of cocoa, being eroded. We have an annual deforestation rate of 2%. And in this landscape, more and more, you could see farmers experiencing low yield as a result of some of these factors. And then farmers are unable to access the correct input to be able to put in their farming activities to be able to realize bountiful harvests. And so we employ different solutions to be able to overcome some of these challenges. Over there, we apply what is called Farm Management Plan, FDP. So FDP is a digital platform that enables us to really profile farmers to be able to ascertain what it is that is really going on in their farms. So we're able to come up with diagnosis of how much of risk they are, the kind of interventions to apply in order to maximize profit. So there you could see in my screen, I'm doing some informed assessment, trying to diagnose what it is wrong with the farms that I'm really going through, to be able to come up with a better solution to be able to apply and help farmers relieve from the challenges that they're going through. And then also, I come up with a coaching plan after being able to come up with a solution through the FDP app. I am better placed to now coach the farmer to be able to do activities based on particular point in time. All of activities are time-based. So if you miss a particular point in time, certain activities that's supposed to do, you might not really be able to reverse it and ultimately contribute to your productivity levels. And so coaching support that I give to farmers. And then also I run farmers through climate smart agriculture, how best of composts they can use, resources that are available to them. For farmers that are unable to patronize mineral fertilizers, there are readily available resources at their disposal that they can use to really enrich their soil. So we use cocoa husk, we use fresh leaves, we use the dry cocoa pods, and then we use ash, we prepare compost, and then we apply. We apply through, we prepare what's called compost tea. So the compost tea, we get it from the compost, and then we apply the liquid on the trees. By so doing, we are enriching the soil, and farmers are relieved from the financial burden supposed to go through of buying a lot of fertilizer to fertilize their farms. And then also we've come up with Village Savings and Loan Association that is able to help farmers contribute amounts of money so that they'll be able to build economic resilience, be able to really get money to reinvest in in their farms. We employ landscape governance approach, an approach that really galvanizes support from all stakeholders, private sector, community leaders, chiefs, for us to be able to come up with a better solution of addressing deforestation challenges facing the landscape. We also do cocoa intensification programs within a piece of land. What best practices can a farmer do that would be able to enable the farmer to be able to maximize profits, which is not necessarily encouraging into forest areas. We also support farmers with additional livelihood support, such as vegetable farming, so as able to diversify their streams of income, so that they don't really focus on one product, which is cocoa. But then in the lean cocoa season, when there is no cocoa, they can rely on the proceeds from the other crops. And then we support farmers with youth in cocoa farming activities. Youth comes with a lot of energy, vitality, and ideas. They develop their niche through the application of technology. So integrating young people in cocoa farming means that we really want to revive the sector, bringing more hands to the table, so that we get to see a lot more productivity, increasing. So that is really what we are doing in our landscapes.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Samuel, for that. Just seeing Crema right there on the presentation has reminded me of the joy we had with the GLF coming to visit community resource management areas in Ghana last year, and seeing how this has been done in practice. And I loved what you said, that farmers are the best scientists, that they're natural experimenters, identifying the best solutions. But at the same time, that there are ways that we can support farmers, touching on improved management plans, monitoring, but all of this being done with a human-centered design and people-centered approach. Now, I want to take us to another landscape or seascape, if you wish. And it's something that we don't talk about, but when we talk about food, we're also talking about the marine and ocean ecosystems, where we are currently facing an unprecedented global decline in marine fish populations in coastal waters. And I have the opportunity to introduce to you and to hear from Raymond Jacob, who is a senior manager for data and fisheries in Rare Indonesia and working on the project Fish Forever. Raymond, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lina. Hi, everyone. Thank you. This story will be a bit different with Crystal and Samuel. I will be sharing on how technology-based approach could improve the small-scale fisheries management. So I work for Rare, same with Paula. Rare is an organization that catalyzes behavior change to achieve conservation result in terrestrial program, climate change, innovative financing, and also fisheries. In particular, the small-scale fisheries through a program called Fish Forever. Fish Forever is a community-driven process supported by scientific design to establish the managed access and reserve in coastal waters. Now it is being implemented in 5 countries, and as you can see in the small map, the inset, in Indonesia we work in 2 provinces, Southeast Sulawesi and also West Papua. We work together with the provincial and district governments there. Can you go to the next slide, please? So dealing with small-scale fisheries means that we are dealing with the biggest fishery sector that employs around 90% of all fishers globally. Also in Indonesia, 90% of the fishers are considered small-scale, which is around 2 million people. So they are small in scale, but big in numbers. This is a typical small-scale fisher in Indonesia, Mr. Hartono, our friend. He is a senior fisher, super grateful with his life because fishing is part of the culture, despite of many challenges that he faces. This small-scale fishery sector is really full of uncertainty, like ecosystem and fishery resources variability, volume and catch uncertainty. And as we know, coastal communities are also highly vulnerable to climate change impact. So the key is really to empower the small-scale fisheries community to be able to monitor, to understand, to decide, and to manage their fisheries that they are highly dependent on. As we know, also illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and overfishing are still threatening. We think that unreported aspect needs extra attention while also addressing overfishing. So there's a need to help the decision makers to produce data-driven regulations. So if you go to the next slide, please. So we have been trying to address that lack of data, the unreported issue for small-scale fisheries communities through an app called Our Fish. It is designed by our leader, Steve Box. As you can see in the slide, this is Miss Nurlini, a female buyer from Southeast Sulawesi. She was recording her octopus through the app. The app is very light, using pictures and numbers and less alphabetical. And it was designed to be used by the first buyer. As we know that they play a very important role in the business chain, but also socially. For some buyers, we lend the phone, while most of the buyers use their own smartphone to do Our Fish. They provide their own also internet, because they use their phone for other entertainment things like Facebook, YouTube, and like other fun applications. To date in Indonesia, we have 70 buyers like Ms. Nurlini here that are voluntarily using this app to record catches now from more than around 1,000 fishers. They have recorded around 190 tons of fish with nominal value around 340,000 US dollars. The analyzed fisheries data, the trend, the catch per unit effort are returned to the community members through poster, social marketing staff, and used also as an input in developing the management plan, the fisheries management plan. The local government also have access to the data for their decision-making process. Our Fish is not only about data and science, it's also a leverage tool. With this transaction information, fisheries transaction information ready at the buyer's fingertips, we are soon going to conduct a financial literacy training and saving club in the community. Through this app, we also witnessed a fish catch decline due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And also we got information on who are actually still surviving, while other data collection program mostly stopped. So using Our Fish is a new behavior. They need to see the benefit of adopting this program and how the barriers to the adoptions are removed. To scale it up, we are thinking to integrate this with government program, or maybe also even like licensing. Those are the opportunities that we see. We also still need the team on the ground to listen from the user about the input, to return the information to the user, and also troubleshoot any issue. If you go to the last slide. All right, this is my last slide, and this girl is, she is Intan, 12 years old. She has been helping her father, an octopus buyer, to input the transaction to the phone. So it is positively adopted. It can also be one family activity. Lastly, I would say thanks to all our fish buyers in all countries, and also the team to persistently implement this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raymond. I absolutely love that picture. And I think it's a reminder that when we're talking about small-scale producers, we're also talking about families, and it's very much a family affair. And part of that training and the work that you do involves not just the women and the men, but also the children. So it's great to see that. And now I've seen some really great questions from the audience already. There's a lot of questions in traditional knowledge and how to appropriately really implement projects. So I invite all of our speakers at the moment to turn their camera and their video on. We will now kind of dive into a panel discussion. We have a few questions we want to pose to you. And the first is really looking at the crises that we're currently facing today. We're talking about two crises. There's COVID-19, and then there's climate change. And Paula, I'd love if you could answer this first one, which is, how is agriculture shifting due to climate change, and how is RARE now evolving and working to combat these emerging challenges?
Thank you, Selena. And I just want to thank all my fellow panelists for some really insightful presentations and exchanges. I think that what's really critical about climate change in terms of agriculture is that obviously we all know the litany of impacts, right? We all know that. I won't repeat that. But it's also that it's really accentuating the risk profile of agriculture. Agriculture was already fraught with uncertainty. It makes planning, and it makes getting access to credit and other issues quite challenging. But then when you throw in the incredible uncertainty that now, or risk, climate risk, that it can be a part of the picture, what you end up with is a situation in which it's very difficult for particularly smallholder farmers that have very small coping ranges. They don't have a lot of resources to really be able to navigate these very uncertain and uncharted trends, if you will. So as I was saying earlier, the monsoon cycles are changing, seasons are changing, and you hear again and again, it didn't used to be like this. We used to know when it would rain. We used to know, and things are changing even faster than farmers are able to adapt to. So that's why I was saying that for us, what's really important is to give farmers as many tools as they can so that they can manage their land in a more informed way. And I think when agriculture was more calendar-based, it was easier to have sort of road and traditional extension service support, for example. But now the extension support really has to be about showing the farmer how many different elements interact. For example, training the farmer to keep track of temperature and water. Very few farmers actually keep records of temperature, water, of how many inputs they use. So record keeping, for example, is something that becomes actually something that enhances a farmer resilience because it enhances their capacity for informed decision making. And we need to reform agricultural extension services. So it's not about transmitting knowledge to farmers, but it is about co-creating knowledge with farmers and bringing in also a lot of knowledge. Somebody was just saying, that farmers are the best scientists. They know their land best. So also bringing back and helping them to recover in many cases, traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge that they have that has been sort of subsumed over the last decades with this drive for what I could call extractive agriculture, which is to get yields and higher yields at all costs. And farmers have forgotten that. And so it's about changing when you have that agency, when you have that capacity for informed decision making. It's not only about changing the practices and the kind of inputs you use, for example, a lot of references to compost, but also about what even the landscape should look like. Because we have seen it in Colombia, for example, with coffee. At one point, there was a decision that shade-grown coffee wasn't good, and there was wholesale decimation of entire landscapes to get rid of the trees. In many cattle ranching places and countries, trees are seen as bad. You want a clean landscape. And this is true in Colombia, in the US, and in many countries around the world. So also changing the understanding, the mindset of what a properly managed landscape looks like, that also becomes a part of changing the shifts and being able to better deal with climate change and other disasters. I think at the end, it's about resilience, ecological resilience, economic resilience, and social resilience, as so many of the presentations and conversations that my fellow panelists shared with us really exemplify.
Yeah, I love what you've brought up. Really, in crisis, it disrupts the entire system, and also what's historically been a strength for farmers is their own knowledge of the land. And so you touching again on the importance of information and monitoring and tracking. It really speaks to I think what Samuel was touching on earlier in his presentation. And Sam, I'd love to bring you in here and hear your perspective on the same question. How is agriculture shifting due to climate change? What are the emerging challenges that you're seeing? And Sam, you're muted at the moment, so we can't hear you.
Sorry, I think that the challenges are well highlighted by Paula. And so if you could, the challenges are quite common to all of us, and they have been well highlighted by Paula. If you would permit me, then I would like to share more perspectives on how to really address those challenges. Okay, and so I would rather propose a climate smart model where we're able to come up with different types of climate smart approach, building on multi-tier system, not just resorting to one or two kind of a climate smart agriculture approach, but having a lot of systems in place so that the farmer could adopt to. For example, in our landscape, farmers normally grow cocoa. They transplant the seedling before, after when they have planted plantain sucker to provide temperature trees for them. But during the dry season, you get to see the plantain sucker dying off the field, exposing the cocoa seedling. And so it will die off. So if that was a single tier system that they put in place. But then talking about traditional knowledge, for example, you can use the same plantain sucker to apply it on the ground. You would split it into pieces, and then you would put it on the ground to provide mulch. And then also you could use the composting I mentioned to also add up, so that you're able to build the resilience of the crop to be able to survive in the harsh climatic environment. So building multi-tier system would also help. And then I would also propose for holistic management tool that combines knowledge, agricultural knowledge, agronomic knowledge, weather forecast knowledge, economic knowledge. All of these tools ought to be put together as a holistic tool given to the farmer, and also to assist in extension services. Assuming that I'm supposed to touch base with farmers and I have access to a holistic management tool with which I'm able to approach a farmer, then my knowledge I'm going to share will not be, will not be centered on one thing, but rather a holistic thing. So I'm giving a whole package, a one-stop shop solution to the farmer to be able to apply on the grounds, and so that in the end you get to see productivity being translated on the ground, and then put smiles on the faces of farmers. And then I'll also mention affordable and accessible seeds for farmers. And so getting this is, I'm talking about, is supposed to be drought and disease resistant to farmers. So we are talking about the role of research, okay, in this. For us to be able to get disease and drought resistance seeds, all about research, coming up with the best tool that is able to support farmers wherever they are is really, really great, because farmers plant seeds and you're going to see the seeds, not really surviving in the grounds. And so when we are able to develop much better research, we'll be able to support farmers in this area, and then also come up with the best agroforestry systems. We need to be able to determine which impact zone that we are working in, and the best climate agroforestry systems to really put in place. Systems in Colombia might not be the same in Ghana. Even in Ghana, we live in different ecological zones. And so we need to really be able to determine which ecological zones really work well for us, so as we're able to adapt local knowledge to it, adapt farmers to it, and it really, really crucial. And so talking about the issue of holistic approach, I have 3 things in mind. It helps us to really be able to address risk assessments. And because farmers, before they go into farming, they're supposed to know how much risk they are, the profit and loss analysis assessment supposed to make before they commit themselves to farming, and then also the investment requirements that they ought to know before they go in there. All of these things are supposed to be known at the onset of farming. By and large, you don't get to see farmers having all of this knowledge available to them. And so when we are able to come up with these innovative ideas, then we'll be able to help farmers recover, help farmers to build resilience against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel. I think it's important that you touched on the holistic as being something we need to think about. And I've been thinking about how crises have a way of revealing to us how interconnected and interlinked systems are. Sometimes when they're all working, you don't see those linkages, but it's in these moments and climate change with COVID-19 that people really are able to see that. And Raymond, I want to turn to you now to continue the discussion on how to address complex challenges, and to come back to that word that we used earlier on, which was innovation. And how have you practically used innovation in your work, and what does that look like for you?
So yeah, innovation. So for us, using the OurFish app, which is, using the smartphone to address the challenge is like innovation. It's too obvious innovation. It's like right in front of your eye, but like we should harness it, right? It's there. People use it every day, and we see that as an opportunity to really address their problem. The other innovation is also the real-time data. I think for us it's important. It's like 1 hour after they enter the data, then whoever will see it in the website, they can access that, and then they get they get the sense of what is happening really in the real time in their area. So I think that's how we use innovation. But I think I highlighted also on my last sentences of the presentation the importance to also hear from the user, the people, the community that they will use the innovation is one critical thing. That's why we still have people on the ground that work with them, that process the innovation that we introduce. And we also need to be open that our innovation will need their input. It should be able to be revised based on the community's input. I think that's how innovation works, right? It's not like one way, but it's actually two ways between the creator, the facilitator, but also the user. Thanks.
No, that's perfect. It's actually, you've touched on the question that we had in the audience, which was to see how modern practices and whether modern practices are impacting traditional ways of farming or fishing, and how are those impacts being seen in both negative and positive ways. Would you be able to kind of dive in and talk a little bit more about maybe that tension between modern practices, traditional practices, and what it really is like in practice to be able to introduce a new technology to farmers or fishers in your case?
Right. So introducing the technology is, like I said, it's a new behavior, right? So introducing new behavior, it will take some time. There's like a theory, the diffusion of innovation, that we are actually addressing a certain percentage of people, like innovators, that's how we call them, the innovators, to really use it before other people then start seeing it and then they start to adopting it. So I think finding the target audience, really characterizing the target audience is really important to accelerate the adoption of innovation. I think if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to think about it less as an introduction and more of a process and a conversation and a two-way dialogue with communities and shaping that. And I want to turn to Crystal, because when we talk about innovation, people automatically think about young people. They're quick to adopt technology, they're super savvy, they're creative, they don't have all of these, traditional ways holding them back per se. But I want to get your perspective in terms of how can we get more young people involved in the shift to innovation and transformation in agriculture?
Thank you very much for that question. As a young person, I feel very much drawn to young people because particularly in Africa, we've been unschooled from what we knew. Agriculture has lost its dignity. And for me, the first thing that needs to happen is we need to rebrand agriculture. I think that if agriculture was paying as much as any other job would pay, I don't think that I would want to sit in an office for 8 hours typing numbers or working with papers. The land is live. When you're out in the farm, you reconnect, and that is something that we've completely lost. So if we could rebrand agriculture by changing the policies around agriculture, ensuring that the farmer gets what he deserves, and just little steps like that, I think a lot of young people would begin to look at it in a different way. Another thing for me, again, is to help these young people to reconnect to the land. There's a big issue in Africa with land because most of the corporations have bought all the land and they're building houses, mansions, and businesses and all of that. And so much so that the people who actually need the land are not able to have access to it. Again, there's a mentality that agriculture is for the young people. I think we see it pretty much everywhere in Africa, in Europe. Agriculture is for the old people. Also because, like I said, agriculture has lost its value. But if we could help these young people reconnect to the land, because the land has been destroyed. So you would hear a young person tell you, I have been trying and doing a lot of stuff, but I'm not even able to feed from that land. So if we can reconnect them, bring back those things that our mothers used to do that worked so well, that would give them so much produce, and they were even able to share surplus, then I think that many young people would want to get engaged. In the community where I live for example, in Bafut, there is a possibility to get land if you want to do a project around agriculture or some kind of community project. But this is also knowledge that is not known to the young people, because most of them are gone out to the city, where really there's no possibility to do that kind of agriculture. The least they can do is have a garden or something. But if actually this information was made more available to these young people, then they know, okay, if I need to start a project that involves food, because food is the future. We can't live if we don't have food, and young people are the future. So we need to involve them. If we're going to talk about sustainability, they need to be the focus. So a lot of energy needs to go back into bringing these young people into the realization that there is profit, there is money, there is wealth, there is health, there is everything in the land. And in that way, then we begin to shift the mentality and the narrative around agriculture.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I think it's so important to look at what's happening generationally, especially when it comes to agriculture, and to begin. It's even more complicated in a sense when you start to look at, there's challenges that farmers are facing, but then there's also the perspectives that are evolving in the younger generation, and those are also important to consider and to think about as we take interventions that are long-term, that are holistic, that really involve building the future that we want. And we cannot have those conversations without young people there and addressing the specific challenges that young people face. And so we have a question or a comment that's come in from the audience on uncertainty. And it's something that Paula touched on as well, and how this concept can be introduced to smallholder farmers or fisheries. And I think, Raymond, you might be perfectly poised to answer this question.
Yeah, thanks, Lina. So uncertainty is for sure a challenge in the coastal fisheries. I mean, like there are like a lot of like uncertainties, like data uncertainties and like management uncertainties. But for the small scale fisheries communities, not getting a fish after they go out fishing is like a big challenge for them, right? It's a big issue for them. Also, like not knowing that if they are secure in terms of physical climate change impact, because they live in the coastal, and there might be like high waves, like tsunami, strong wave, and etc. Sea level rise, and so on. So communities, coastal communities, are really vulnerable to uncertainties. And I think the way we try to help them to reduce the risk, to reduce the vulnerability to those uncertainties, either it's climate related or no, by actually introducing the managed access. So we help them to establish an area where they can have, they can manage who can access the area, who protect, who will harvest the area. It's like a cultural area kind of things. And they also do have like a reserve. The reserve will be supported by a strong design. We will help them with the design. And we're going to set also their expectation on how big is your reserve compared to what level of yield, what level of projection of biomass that you can expect. So those kind of scientific approaches. So by having a very well taken care area in front of their village, like good reserve that will provide all the fish, we are actually trying to reduce the uncertainty. So they have a good area, a good fishing ground, a near shore fishing ground, and they don't have to spend like hours or even like days to go outside to get the same amount of catch. I think that's how we try to address the uncertainty in the coastal communities in Indonesia and also in other countries.
Thanks so much for bringing that up. And as you were talking, I realized that there's no better moment to talk about uncertainty than now in the midst of a global pandemic. And it's something we haven't touched on yet, which is, COVID-19 and how this is really impacting fishers and farmers. And so I want to turn to Paula to ask you, what is your perspective on the impact that they're facing, and then what can actually be done to mitigate these impacts?
Thank you. That's a loaded question, because as we're in the midst of it, we're, I think, every day learning new ways and understanding both how to cope, but also how widespread the impacts are, and that in many cases, there's all these domino effects. So for many farmers and fishers, the disruption along supply chains is impacting them very directly because of either situations related to lockdown, basically that affect both the retail end, wholesalers, as well as transport. It makes them very difficult to get their produce out. And I think this is a pain that's being felt around the world. One of the key aspects, I think, for particularly smallholder farmers is to looking forward to ensure that there's more self-sufficiency in terms of communities being able to really provide for their food security, not just food security in terms of alleviating hunger, but food security in terms of access to adequate and nutritious and stable supplies of food. And I think that this is something that some communities have been able to deal with better than others. And that's something that I think in a post-COVID world, we really need to see how we can ramp up efforts to ensure that kind of self-sufficiency. I think that, but that's related to something also more long-term, which is self-reliance. And it speaks again to what I was saying earlier, really of empowering farmers to be able to manage their land and their work, their livelihoods in a much more informed way. But COVID shows us the limits of that, right? If you depend on a supply chain and there's disruptions along it, there's not very much you can do if you are just one agent in a larger ecosystem. And I think that this is part of a much broader conversation that COVID is now kicking off about really, we've been talking about food systems increasingly over the last years. And the question is now how we can tackle those food systems in ways that are equipping resilience at so many more levels than we had anticipated would have been necessary just a few years ago. And I think COVID is also a really good opportunity to rethink what resilience means because we are now understanding the challenges and also the opportunities of this so-called green recovery that everybody keeps talking about. But unpacking that for smallholders will have specific challenges and particularities. And this is the opportunity to really step up and say that we will not be leaving these communities behind in this recovery period, and that we will be talking about that self-reliance and how we can ensure that they can supply for their families as communities and how they can be better immured against sort of the vagaries, if you will, of larger supply chains. I think it also speaks a lot to the responsibility of major agricultural players and investors of really looking to how this and these requirements can be prioritized.
Thank you, Paula. I think it's great to remind ourselves that we're in the midst of figuring out this post-COVID world or this green recovery that you talked about. And as we begin to shape that and begin to think of that, what that may look like, we cannot forget these realities that we're touching on today. And especially we cannot forget the perspectives of young people, as it will be their world. And so, Crystal, I want to ask you a question also on, touching on self-sufficiency and young people at the moment, they often don't have access to land. They're often in urban areas. So how can we look at urban gardening as a response to the COVID-19 crisis? Or what are some of the ways that you're seeing young people respond to this?
I think that urban gardening is not only a solution for the COVID-19 crisis, but also it could help a lot when we talk about food and sustainability. As we know, in the cities, most of the land has been occupied by skyscrapers or companies or whatever. So to get many more people engaged, this is a great way to look at it because it's affordable and it's pretty much easy to do. You just need a couple you can get. Like in Africa, we use old buckets or old pots or used bottles, just anything that allows us to maximize space. For example, currently where I am, we have an amazing project. Our backyard, we transformed it into a massive harvest land in just a couple of weeks. And for me, that's a great example of what urban gardening can do because we are not able to go to the communities, to the villages where there is more land. So what we need to do is to bring the villages and the cities into the urban space by practicing in this. And they're just, for me, very little steps that one can take. Like if you get something from the store, for example, a celery, you can use that same stock to reproduce more. And that's very sustainable because it doesn't require a lot of space. It doesn't require so much energy, but everybody can feed just from their gardens. And also for me, it's a means to support those who are already doing this in the urban areas. As we have seen during this COVID period, food has become a big issue. Even those who have the money are not able to get access to the food because there's no food in the supermarkets. So we could support local farmers who are already engaged in these activities by buying. For example, we have a lot of vegetables right now and we don't know what to do with it. So one thing we've been doing is just giving away to the communities, but there are people who could use this as a source of income just to support themselves. So for me also, technology would come in because now we're working on a project on developing an application that allows for people in communities to identify who needs what and who has what. If an application like that exists, and then you can easily be able to find your next neighbor who has something that you need. And for me, this is still encouraging the aspect of urban gardening.
Thanks so much, Crystal. It's great to hear what's happening in real time and the hope that is present in being able to really change the paradigm of how we eat and how reliant we have been on systems that have been destructive and not supportive to our own health and to the planet. I love seeing all the questions that are happening and people are already responding to them in the chat box. I do invite all the audience, everyone who's watching, if you see a question and you have a response, please do go ahead and just respond in the chat. And one of the questions, the top rated one actually, is quite simple, and I don't know if we can answer it, but it's, what does it take for local Indigenous knowledge to be recognized as modern? Is there anyone who'd like to take on that question?
Sorry, come again with the question. My network.
Yeah, the question is, what does it take for local Indigenous knowledge to be recognized as modern? How do you think we can shift the paradigm of what we perceive as traditional and what we perceive as a technology even?
By and large, you get to see that science moves in circles. Today, science will tell you this, and tomorrow says, no, go back to the previous stuff, which was really good. So I get to see this question being answered in a way of sharing knowledge, sharing indigenous and traditional knowledge. For me as an extension officer, that I frequently touch base with farmers, you get to see that most of the rich knowledge are undocumented. They are not in books, so you don't get to read from books and then employ them on the ground. But as you touch base with the farmers would tell you what they have been doing on the ground and the successes they have been achieved. In the implementation process, there are clear-cut, stepwise process supposed to go through in implementing projects. It will tell you A, B, C, D stuff they're supposed to do on the ground. So farmers will tell you the knowledge, and then you also incorporate the knowledge that they have shared with you. Practically, a farmer might use pesticides, in applying on the grounds in their farm to be able to deal with particular pests. But they have rich knowledge in dealing with a particular pest, which might not necessarily the use of chemical. And so going down to farmers, consolidating all of the ideas that they have, and see where you could be able to, implement in your projects is really, really, really key. So when we touch base with farmers, it is not always about, going with the best of knowledge and then imposing the knowledge on them. There got to be a time where you need to sit farmers down to also invite their knowledge, how they do things to be able to address, for example, climate change or pests or whatever that they usually encounter in their farm. And then you subject it to modern science or modern practices where it can fit in. If you're able to do that, I believe that we're able to find a space for indigenous or cultural knowledge in project implementation or addressing climate change.
Thanks, Sam. I think it's great to hear your thoughts on this, and also to touch on pests and how the traditional knowledge present in there, because it's a big question that was asked as well. And the next maybe tension or point of tension that we often find is we talk about technology and then we talk about scaling up. And so Raymond, I want to talk to you in terms of what are the challenges and the opportunities in using technology to take solutions to scale?
Scaling up is always a challenge for many programs, right? Not only like technology based, but it's always a challenge. First one, we need to, I think what we have been trying to do is to really try it and find the opportunity. We work with the government very closely. We are trying to find where actually the technology can be tapped into the government program to ensure its sustainability. That's one. We also wrap the technology through a social marketing approach, which is also one of rare flagship program. The Pride campaign, we try to market the idea of using this technology to new users. That's two, and I think just really try it with the correct target audience will be the key to scale it up. And I think once people really see the benefit of using the technology, and you got testimonials from a lot of people, I think it will be easier for the technology, for that particular technology to be adopted by a broader audience. So bringing the benefit, the tangible benefit is really a key also in scaling up.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And I want to take the time to ask really a question to Moses. Because there are some questions that have come up around water availability and the challenges that you were touching on, and the farmers in Mundri West were talking about. So Moses, we'd love to bring you into this conversation. What are some of your thoughts from this discussion? What do you want to share with our audience?
Yes, you get me? Yes, I appreciate. I think that's very important to discuss these issues that affect farmers. I will recommend we use technology because this is the time to empower youths and young women using technology in terms of using it on agriculture, so that we also see the issues of the digitalization of agricultural value chains to farmers. We need to teach them about empowering them about knowledge on technology, bringing people together, those who have knowledge and confidence of technology, bringing them together and training them on how they can tackle these issues of challenges of agriculture through using technology in South Sudan. And because this is a young nation, we need to come up with the idea, and also those who can support in terms of awareness, in terms of giving them opportunity of some knowledge, because youth from other sides, they're coming back as returnees and they don't have something to do. They need to be empowered in terms of agriculture and also knowledge, so that they can be can do something that because this place there's challenges in terms of insecurity. People may engage, if they are not involved, they can engage themselves in insecurity in terms of attacking people and doing other things that are not good for the community, for the development of the community. So we need to come up with an idea for youth empowerment and women empowerment. How can we involve them in agriculture? Because this South Sudan, there's a big land that can be used for agriculture, and it's very fertile because it's not used. Many people ran because of conflict, and they're coming back. They've already come back home. So we are seeing a way we can use to empower them through agriculture. But now we relate it to technology, so that they can spread to other counties in South Sudan.
Thank you so much, Moses.
Yes.
I think it's great to hear your perspective and to start to begin a conversation. And I think the challenge is there's so many questions right now from the audience that I don't think we're going to get to them all. And so I'll ask all of our speakers, if you can, to please do get into Huva on the app after we finish our session. See if you can answer as much as you can. And in the moments where we can't, really, to the audience, there's so much incredible knowledge present in those that are watching. This is something that we have to build together. It's something that Paulette touched on. This is about co-creation. This is no longer a one-way process. And so we do want to continue the conversation after the session closes. And to close the session, I do want to ask the audience to go back to Slido. We have one final question for you, which is, what is your main takeaway from this session? We've talked about a lot. We've heard perspectives from farmers, from fishers, different landscapes. We've talked about youth. And we want to know what's the big lesson you learned? What's your big takeaway? And in the meantime, I want to ask our panelists one final question. And this question is about resilience, which is really the ultimate goal and where we're trying to get to. So I want to know from each of the speakers, how might we build resilience to local catastrophes and to changing agricultural landscapes as we, enter this post-COVID world, as we continue to gear up to fight climate change? What are the ways that you think it's important to really to build resilience? And I will kick it off with Samuel.
Okay, thank you, Salina. Building resilience in this difficult moment is really important for us to do. For imagine a landscape where farmers are deprived of access to loan in order to really expand their agricultural productivity, it's really challenging because of many risks. There are no reliable banking systems that support farmers. And so, for example, we could give leadership and organization to farmer groups, smallholder farmers, by mobilizing them and then giving them the training to be able to save and invest, maybe through village savings alone. When you're able to do that, farmers will be able to build a strong niche for themselves, build economic sustainability for themselves, not really relying on government support or relying on somebody else's support, but within themselves, putting resources together, saving together, and accessing loan from that savings. Through that, you're building economic resilience for them that is sustainable in the long run, having access to it. So for me, it is really important that we give leadership to farmer communities, and then also supporting them to be able to come together in the form of cooperatives. That is a really difficult thing for them to do by themselves. So when organizations start based with farmers and then focus on this, I think it will help a lot.
Thank you so much, Samuel. And I want to hand it over to Crystal to give her thoughts on resilience and final thoughts about this session.
Thank you, Selena. Personally, I think that the thing that would help us really get to where we want to get to is systems change. For too long now, I believe that we have hung onto things that are not working, and that we do not realize that things have actually shifted from where we used to be, and they're going to shift even more. So for me, we need to shift as the shift is happening. And for that, we need to build a whole new kind of education. We need to adapt to the realities. Couple of years ago, there was nothing around technology in agriculture, but we now see that there's a possibility to bring the two together to get better results. So we need to encourage that change of mind. We need to build a behavioral change in everybody. And this is not a group thing. This is an individual thing. Everybody needs to understand that we are in one planet. There are no borders, there are no colors, and we just need to think about the good of everybody. And for me, another thing would be to stop living in generalization, because for too long now, we copy and paste solutions that don't work. We need to understand, for example, the soils in Europe are different from the soils in Africa. So a solution that might necessarily work in Europe might not necessarily work in Africa. If we can begin to deconstruct such mentalities and adapt to the realities on the ground and find solutions that are suitable to the issues on the ground, then slowly we would move towards a more sustainable world for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. That's extremely powerful to hear, and then a good reminder for us all. Raymond, would you like to share your thoughts?
That's interesting. You brought up the resilience and also the COVID-19. It's very timely. We did our study as well. And the amazing thing was we found that all strategies were actually already at the community. That's why I think I agree with, there's no traditional, like they're also the best scientists. So they have all the strategies to cope with these bad situations, but not all strategies can be done by them without like some help from others. So I think to build the resiliency, really listen to the community, what actually they have in mind, and we learn how far they can go with that strategy by their own, and also what can we help to push the strategy that actually came out from the community. I think that's how we increase the resiliency of the community instead of like telling them what to do and etc. And yeah, I think that's from me for the resiliency.
Thank you so much. And Paula, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. I think we've covered a lot of it, but I think it's to start to understand that risk is with us to stay. I mean, climate change is here, and there will be other disruptors at a systems level, and we have to understand development very differently. And helping farmers and fishers understand and be able to assess the ecosystems around them, the information they have, and to really have as I think Crystal was saying, not just the systems, but a systemic understanding of that interaction between the productivity of ecosystems and their own productivity. I think that has to be really the linchpin, that environmental considerations are no longer optional or nice accessories to have, but are actually at the very heart of productive sector. And helping farmers and fishers to translate that into a new reality is absolutely fundamental. And that has to do with agency. And I think that it's also very much related with making farming and fisheries dignified professions. And I think that is something that is really, really critical if we're going to also stop the kind of migration we're seeing from rural areas and make working the land, working the seas, something that is very attractive and appealing for youth. And I think that is something that we really have to focus on. And finally, I would just pick up on something that Samuel and Raymond alluded to, which is on the finance side. RARE, through the Fish Forever program, has created Savings Club. And this is the kind of local initiatives that are needed so that there's a lot more agency in dealing with economic resilience also at the local level.
Amazing. And lastly, I want to hand it over to Moses. If you could just say quickly in 60 seconds, as we're nearing time, what your biggest takeaway is here.
Yeah, I think that's good. My take is I think when we talk about strengthening resilience, it's very important to climate change and vulnerability. We need to require adaptation of food production system for resilience, both at livelihood level and at the ecosystem level, so that community know what ecosystem means. We need to train them, at least the good number of them, so that everybody know what ecosystem means, because many people they still don't understand, and also they lack experience on this issue. And I think it's better for us to expand it so that we do more awareness in terms of community awareness, in terms of radio stations, and even using local leaders, local women, so that we do the perfect solution for adaptation or the issues of strengthening resilience to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses, and thank you so much to our incredible panel. I want to just take one moment to go to our Slido questions and see the results in terms of what was our audience greatest takeaway from today. And as we pull that up, this is a big one for me as well. Agriculture should be treated as a respectful profession to prevent migration, touched on by Crystal and by Paula. We need to involve young people to really change working the land into something that works for the future generations. The need to adapt systems change, knowledge sharing, supporting them with tools. That someone's realized that, there's similar challenges over time and across the world, whether you're a fisher or a farmer. And therefore, there is an opportunity for us to think together really as a global community about solutions. Make innovation a family approach. farmers are scientists of their place. This is all really resonating with what I've seen and my takeaways from this session, that innovation is a process, not an introduction in one moment, that we need to rethink the words modern and technology, and begin to look at farmers and fishers as the senior scientists of their land, to make sure that we are building agriculture, fisheries, farming as a profession for youth and help them reconnect their relationship to the land that we've lost. And then lastly, we talked about crises, and I think what Paula said is important to keep in mind, that risk is with us to stay. And so achieving resilience requires a new ability to adapt for humanity, and we have to learn how to do that. And I hope that we learn how to do that in continued conversation with each other. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the speakers, the contributors, and you, the audience. Thank you I've already seen so many tweets on social media. Thank you for engaging with us in the chat, in the Q&A. And if you'd like to find out more information about Greta, about RARE, or Better World Cameroon, we are sharing links to the websites in the chat box now. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll join you in a little bit to respond to your questions. I'm really grateful for this session. Thank you all, and have a lovely day enjoying the rest of the GLF.